I'm going to grab a highlighter and just highlight some of the important concepts here. So leasing is like renting a car, but it's long term. This is what I want you to highlight. Leasing is essentially, on page 45, leasing is essentially an alternative to financing, right? So instead of leasing, you would finance. And you know what the biggest reason is people like to would consider a lease is a lower monthly payment. Try to remember that. The only reason why somebody would want to lease instead of finance is because the lower payments. It's more attractive. And why are the payments lower? Well, when you lease, you're not paying for the entire value of the car. You're only paying for using it. And while you're using it, it loses its value. So the dealers need to make up for that loss in value. Quite often when you buy a used car from a dealership, it's probably a returned lease. Somebody drove it for 2 years or 3 years. They returned it, and now you're buying that used vehicle off of them. Okay, so that's how they have their used vehicle inventory. So think about it this way. They get they get a shipment of like 100 cars. I don't know if you've ever gone down where that Eastern Chrysler dealership is. They have like all these cars in this huge lot, just a bunch of brand new cars. You're like, I guess all these like brand new. They actually end up leasing a lot of those. Somebody pays for it, they make their money, they return it, and now they sell it to you used, they make a profit again. So if they can't sell it new, they will lease it and then get it that way. Okay. The lease payment, right? The lease payment is really what's in it is the depreciation of the vehicle, any wear and tear, because when you drive it, let's face it, you might scratch it here and there. The seats will be worn out. They need to account for that because it's going to lose its value. You're going to put on mileage. So that they need to make their money back there as well. And of course, the dealership wants to profit yet on top of that. So they need to say, hey, we're going to lose value. There's going to be some wear and tear. They're going to put on kilometers and we want to make some money. So your payment has these components in it. Okay. Let's talk about some definitions. The down payment is not taxed. That's very important. The down payment is not taxed, and you don't get it back. If there's a $2,000 down payment, that is basically the money up front that you have to pay. It's kind of like I would say like a cell phone. If you want to have lower payments, you got to pay a certain amount up front or else you need to return it. But if you want to keep it, you need to put a down payment, right? It's a bit like that, like you're offsetting the cost, but you don't get it back. Lease payment, amount paid per month. This is taxed 12%, very important. Term of the lease, it's the number of years or months. You got to watch out here. Sometimes the question talks years, sometimes months, but it's not a big deal. Just convert. AKA the maturity date. So the term is the same thing as the maturity date. I'm not going to say much more. It's basically when it matures, like their contract is over. Residual value, it's the adjusted price due to the depreciation of the vehicle after lease. It's the cost, here it is. Residual value, when it comes to leasing, is the cost to buy the car at the end of the lease. This is also taxed 12%. So if you want to return the lease, you're like, okay, my 2 or my 3 years are over, I want to return it. They're going to tell you, well, do you want to buy it? You already like the car, you're used to it, you just want to go ahead and buy it. You know it's brand new when you got it, so you're the only owner, you want to just keep it, right? And so there's a price that they have ready for you when you're about to return. That's taxed 12% because think about it, you're buying it from a dealership, and we know that dealership, right? Even if it's used dealer, it's always 12% tax. Then there's the guaranteed residual value. So there's residual value and then something we call guaranteed residual value. It's going to be either or, so don't worry about it too much. Similar to residual value, but it's stated as a fixed dollar amount. Fixed dollar amount. Whereas the other one, I'm going to use a different color. This one is usually stated as a percentage. So an example, the cars you buy might be worth 30,000 new, but when the lease is over, it will be worth 18,000. So 18,000 is the guaranteed residual value. You can expect to pay this amount at the end of the lease in order to own it. Tax 12% as well. So nothing new there. This is new. This is particular to leasing. This is why I would not suggest you lease. One of the main reasons is the mileage cost. Most lease agreements, there's a limit, watch this highlight, limit on the amount of kilometers you can drive. They tell you that. It's in the contract. It can be stated at like 10, this is 100,000 kilometers per year. It could give you in a yearly amount. So if it's a 3-year lease, I made a mistake there, right? This is 10,000. So a 3-year lease would allow for 3 times 10, 30,000. Can you fix that? I don't want to confuse you there. I need to fix that on my original. Right? If you're allowed 10,000 kilometers per year and you're leasing it for 3 years, then essentially you would be able to drive 30,000. If you took it for 2 years, you would be allowed to drive 20,000 kilometers. Okay. Anyways, the mileage cost, there's usually a cost per kilometer that you go over, and right, it will be like it will seem like an insignificant amount, like 15 cents per kilometer. It's not a big deal, but trust me, if you go over by quite a bit, it could be thousands of dollars. This is also taxed 12%, so add that to your Okay, let's keep going. Formulas that I gave you. The province does not give you these. Whoa, right? Lots of formulas. I would chunk them up. This part right here, maybe I use a highlighter. When it comes to, if the question at all has anything to do with mileage, these kind of go together. Like they are kind of, when you're dealing with mileage cost, it may not even be a part of the question. They may not talk about kilometer limits or anything like that, but if they do, you go here. This is the one you want. You can put mileage cost on top of it. So you need to figure out kilometers past, like you can say over limit if you want. Kilometers over limit. So you need to figure out, how many am I over by? How many kilometers? So there are 2 options here. So you can either go kilometers driven minus the allowance per year, or you can go kilometers driven minus allowance. Like they may just say, when you bring this car back, it better not have more than 50,000 kilometers. Like they don't say per year, they just give you the whole amount. So this is how you would find your mileage cost, because I want you to understand the formulas. I gave them to you, but I want you to understand them. You go kilometers past limit, so you basically take this, insert it there, right? Kilometers over the limit times the rate per kilometer, right? Like 20 cents per kilometer, 5 cents, it varies. What does this do? 1.12 adds taxes, right? So if the question says after tax, you would use that part. If it doesn't mention, if it says before tax, you would omit that part. So you need to understand the formula or else it won't really help you. Next, total payments. So total paid in your lease, right? Like in terms of payments, you just take the payment times the number of months times 1.12. So this will be the total payments you've made. If the question says the total lease cost, there are 3 components to it. I will just say this. Component 1. So your down payment, if there is one. Sometimes there is no down payment. Like it says 0 down. So what this will just be 0. Okay, let me zoom in a bit more. I asked them for a bigger screen, but they told me there's no money. I asked them already for years. I can have a bigger screen. This part would be the total payments. Okay, guys. This is essentially copy paste, right? This component 2. So there's the down payment, the total payments, and then this is component 3. I think I need to say it one more time, no tax. So a question, this is why it's important that you know that the down payment has no tax, because it could say determine the total lease cost or the total cost of the lease after tax. This gets taxed, right? This gets taxed, but this one will have no tax. This component has no taxes. So make sure your down payment doesn't have taxes on it. And if this seems a little overwhelming to you, maybe once you start using them, you're going to be like, oh, that's fine. Okay, I get it now, right? Residual value, if it says after tax, you just take it, multiply it by 1.12. I would just have all of these on my study sheet. Total cost, including purchase. So I will actually be specific here. Lease, then purchase. That's what this is saying. Okay, right? Like I'm leasing the car and then I purchase it. Then you would have to do it this way. And this part right here, guys, let's do some highlighting here. The total lease cost, right? You just grab that number and plug it in there because you would have already figured out what that was. And then the residual value, right? Once you figure that out, that goes here. Okay. So you would essentially, if this is ever required of you to answer, you would essentially just add these two numbers that you already got above. Just do yourselves a favor, don't double tax yourselves, right? So sometimes students go 1.12 on a question above and then they see this formula, oh, there's 1.12 again. If you already taxed your total payments, right? If you already did that, don't do the 1.12 again, right? Because then you're double taxing. Let's do some math. At least one question, and then I'll leave you to it. We'll do more leasing tomorrow. No AC on leasing, so you don't have to worry about that. Let's go to 49. And when I do leasing part 2 tomorrow, I'll fill in the rest here. I do this example, then I'll leave you to it. A minivan sells for an MSRP of $28,500. So this is the value of the car. Value of car. So if you were to buy it, if you wanted to buy that car, that's how much you would pay. This is on 49, okay? However, there's an option, hey, leases, there's leasing for $479 per month plus tax. The term is 24 months. Okay, important information. The down payment is $1,500, and the guaranteed residual value is, watch this, there's no dollar amount, but it says it'll be 62% of whatever the MSRP is. Right? So obviously not 100%, it's 62% of what the MSRP is. That's what you will have to pay. I'll make a note here. Price to buy at the end of lease. Okay, write that down. That's what that means, that last statement there. And so after today, if you make sure the formulas are on your study sheet under the section called leasing. After that, we're not doing anything significant anymore in this unit. So leasing is kind of like the last one with formulas. So use up more than half a page if you need to. Here we go. Calculate the total payments amount after tax. Okay. So I go total payments. It's asking for the $479. Let me just get that here. So it's actually payment times months times 1.12. That's what that would call for. So the payment here is $479 times, in this case it says 24 months. If it's at 2 years, 2 times 12 is 24, right? So 24 months. It says after tax, so we have to go times 1.12. Can you do it all in one shot? Yes, you can, right? Or you can do it in steps. 479 times 24 times 1.12. There it is. 12,875.52. So in total, over the 2 years, you will have made a total of $12,875 worth of payments over 2 years. So look at this, right? The car is worth almost 30 grand, but the first 2 years you only paid 12 grand, right? You just paid a portion of it. That's why leasing is cheaper instead of financing. Calculate the total cost of the lease after tax. Total cost of lease. So I will call this total cost of lease, and that calls for down payment plus total payments plus mileage. And I'll tell you right now, there is no mileage here. Mr. Erickson, how do you know? Because I have my answer key. No, that's not good enough, right? That's a lame answer. There is nothing mentioned about mileage, right? Nothing. So omit, right? I'll just say no mileage. Mileage mentioned. Okay, no mileage mentioned here. So the down payment is already given to us. It's $1,500. Do not tax it. Okay. The total payments, I might have to calculate it, but in this case, I already have that. So I'm just gonna use that number. That's 12,875.52, and there's no mileage. So really, this is all it is. So I still have that previous answer on my screen. I'm just gonna add $1,500 to it. This is after tax. I'm going to stop there because I think your brains are hurting probably. We're going to continue tomorrow.